any natural disaster, flood, fire, there's a sense of winning and having a fair fight. And unfortunately, there's no fair fights against wildfires in California.
This is Robert Baird. Until 2022, he was the Forest Service Regional Director for Fire and Aviation for California and the Pacific Islands.
When you see devastated communities, there's nothing like it. Everything's dead. Everything. There's no birds. There's nothing on the ground. It's just scorched earth. It crunches. It's all cinder. I mean, it looks like a movie set. It looks fake. And it's really hard to conceptualize how it's ever going to get right again.
While we were recording this series, fires raged through the Palisades, Eaton, and Hearst areas of Los Angeles. Homes, businesses, forest, across a huge area went up in flames. At least 29 people lost their lives. For survivors, the monetary cost of the fires has been estimated at somewhere between $250 and $275 billion. The emotional cost? Numbers can't capture that. Like for many people around the world, natural disasters are deeply personal. But what if there was a way to get ahead of fire or any weather-related natural disaster, to really accurately predict their likelihood, severity, trajectory, and then manage land, infrastructure, and people accordingly, to make it a fair fight? That is exactly what Sarah Russell, a project lead here at X, has set out to do.
In 5 years, if we're successful, no one's going to say, that flood came and wiped out that whole town. We just didn't have the right information, or this major heat wave shut down this entire power grid. Too bad we didn't know. In 5 years, that will not be acceptable or even tenable because everyone will have had the information they needed to make a better decision, the platform, the products that enable people to make and act in ways that allow us to prepare for, respond to, recover from natural disasters.
So a prediction engine, a crystal ball for the natural world.
Yeah, and everything that might be human-made on it too.
Welcome to the Moonshot Podcast. I'm your host and captain of Moonshots, Astro Teller. In this series, we go behind the scenes at X, Alphabet's innovation factory, to meet the people working to solve some of the world's hardest problems with radical creativity and breakthrough technology. In this episode, we're exploring two very different moonshots, one that uses data to help us predict the unpredictable, and one that uses X's engineering know-how to realize a promising new technology. But both are all about protecting communities and building resilience in the world we live in. Sarah is unusual here at X. While PhDs are plentiful, Sarah is a medical doctor. But towards the end of her training, she noticed something about the patients she cared for.
A lot of them were not showing up and missing appointments. And I realized they weren't missing appointments because they didn't want to be there. They just forgot. And so I just started texting my patients. And they all showed up. But then I thought, this should be technology. We should automate this. This should absolutely be automated. So I just told a bunch of people, let's automate this. Who do you think can help me automate this? We should do this for all the patients. And they said, that's a great research project. And I was like, excuse me? Like what? That's your answer? They're like, yeah, we should run a study, a randomized controlled trial comparing. I was like, not at all, dude. Let's go get this in the world. This should just be built. And that's when I realized I was much more of an entrepreneur than I was a research person, which is a very important fork in the road, I think, for clinicians. And that started everything. So I built that into a business, made so many mistakes, and startups die 1,000 deaths. And then made my way to Silicon Valley and did a bunch of work in healthcare technology. And by the time I got to X, the first thing I did here was biotech.
But Sarah soon pivoted into the kind of moonshot she's working on now.
At no point did my manager, Evo, Steve Rich, say, oh no, Sarah, you're a physician, so it has to be healthcare.
So how do you go about making a crystal ball for the natural world? Well, you start with data and lots of it.
Any problem you want to ask about the Earth is going to be inherently challenging to grok because first you're going to have to sort all the data about the Earth into an organizable format. For example, let's just say this, like right now, if I wanted a machine to like very accurately forecast real estate prices in Oregon, you could probably put all of that information in a spreadsheet very easily, and then the machine would work and do a very nice job. The problem with geospatial data, there's like no spreadsheet equivalent. No one's ever created that. All we have is like 8,000 different data formats. So you can't even sort them and actually have the same frame to do the same operation on.
You're saying that there's like census data and there's like the things that are publicly available, which are like the topography maps, but these all like in principle could be connected to each other, but they aren't connected. Some are in PDF, some are in text form. It's like making sense of that heterogeneity.
Exactly. And doing it in a way where a machine can get to work.
This data could be anything from rainfall patterns, maps of previous forest fires and controlled burns, flood maps, any piece of data that is geolocated on the planet. We have the same issue with images of the Earth, publicly available satellite images, drone images, images taken from a Google Street View car. These images might be of the same thing, but they're taken from different angles. The data is anonymized and stored in different formats. And there's another problem.
Historically, this has been very expensive data to store. So companies dump that data. They just like, we can't store all the pictures of these satellites, so we're going to dump it or not even store it. So interestingly, Alphabet kept all the data, kept all of it, and has this enormous repository.
This is called Earth Engine.
Earth Engine. Think of it as a hard drive of all that images. So one of the aha moments is, well, that's interesting when you have a bunch of historical data. You can show that historical data to a machine, and the machine can make sense of it. So the problem, of course, we were interested in is how we could better forecast severe weather. So the job to be done was how do we understand what's going to happen in a way that we could do something about?
We called the team working on this problem Bellwether, and they quickly got to work sorting out all this data.
And we realized that was the hardest point and the thing that was the slowest. And in X terms, we would call that the monkey, right?
You'll have heard this one before. If you want to train a monkey to recite Shakespeare while standing on a 10-foot pedestal, you don't build the pedestal first. That's the easy bit. You start with where all the risk is piled up, teaching the monkey to recite Shakespeare. In there, monkey was predicting something that was both hard to predict and that would be valuable to the world if Bellwether could predict it well. But that wasn't just going to be difficult. It looked impossible.
We realized that should we not be able to solve this problem, it was probably going to have to be the dissolution of the project.
First, they needed to break this problem down, to condense it from predicting everything to predicting one specific thing. And so they decided to start with wildfire. This is where Robert Baird comes in. It's 2020, and Robert is busy. He's managing all the fire crews in the California Forest Service, making sure that the most dangerous fires have the right resources thrown at them. Experience, understanding fire and the local environment is key, but it's been a tough year.
Lightning swept through California, and the challenge with lightning is it can start multiple fires across vast areas.
He was traveling in a command car when he got a notification from someone he didn't know on his phone.
We were in a break between calls, and I'm like, okay, I'll see what this is. Like, well, I got too much to do.
It was one of the Bellwether team trying to connect with him.
I said, well, I'm a little busy, but what do you got?
They explained, and Robert was intrigued.
I've been a beneficiary of technology, having been in the military, and I've seen how situational awareness, intelligence, and prediction can help take the qualitative human view out of it and give you a more independent view of things that are too complex for us to process ourselves.
In order to solve the fire problem, Bellwether needed some data that we didn't have, but that Robert might.
What I ended up exerting energy to do is lowering barriers to provide them data. And then I started exploring where even my team didn't know where all the information was. And so we kept saying, well, here's an overlay of this, and here's the shape files for that, and here's what these satellites are showing us, and here's where fuels work was done to remove fire threat. And they said, okay, watch. And they'd chew it up, assimilate it, and order it.
And Robert's insights were highly valuable.
They would show us what the latest visualizations they were working on, and we'd say, well, if you did this, it would mean more to us. Or, hey, that location there, well, I just know that location doesn't make sense from what you're interpreting. How did you get there? And so then I get to interact with the engineers and the computer scientists and the machine learning people. And it's fascinating, right? How they had built the model and how they had invested the information into the models.
That work with Robert and his team was vital. Bellwether was able to demonstrate that once they had access to the right data, they could process and present it in a way that makes sense to the people planning fire response.
And once it got solved, which was essentially the organization of that data very quickly, it unlocked a ton of stuff for us. Making this data more usable is very exciting. And we made it usable for people on the outside. That was another big component.
Bellwether is now being piloted in the US to help decide where to put in burn lines, where to do fuel work like removing underbrush or dead wood. The model speeds up decision-making and is able to use vastly more data to help make those decisions than a person could possibly analyze. And it will also test those decisions.
So if your model gets very good at forecasting the future, you can actually tweak and make changes to the inputs and say, well, what if there's a controlled burn here? And then the model can rerun and understand and say, well, if you control burn here, this is what happens to the risk.
But that's not the only way this technology can be used. There's another big group of people who are also interested in risk and whose work affects people everywhere.
Insurance is always interested in learning as much as possible about the probability that your house will have a flood or your roof will cave in or something like this. This is like part of their business. Let me learn as much as I can about this risk.
But their models decoding risk don't have the same level of detail or accuracy that Bellwether has been able to build into theirs.
We use a machine learning model that outputs this number, an absolute probability, this number between 0 and 1, or a percentage chance that this home will be in a fire in the year ahead. And then a second number is, if that home is in a fire, what's the probability of burning by at least 50%? Two different numbers. We tell it to you 12 months in advance, and then we also give you another score for 5 years in advance. That score is an absolute number, not a relative number, because currently in the industry, everything is relative. It's severe risk, it's medium risk, it's low risk. What do you make of that? What do you do with that? We give you an absolute percentage. That's important, not relative. The next feature we add is this information, which is this home has this probability of burning. Here are 5 factors that are driving up that fire risk, and here are 5 factors that are driving it down. And it's specific to that structure. And this gets around the whole challenge sometimes you find in machine learning, which is it a black box? Why did it do this? Is it astrology? What's going on under the hood, right? Well, no, we actually can explain it. We can say it's not a black box. The reason this structure has high probabilities because it's on a very steep slope.
So if I'm an insurance company, I send you an address for a home I'm thinking of insuring. You send me those numbers, and then I can use them to be smarter about how I insure the home.
Exactly. We're working with insurance companies because they're critical to the solution, and we're actually very aligned. Here's why. An insurance company only exists if it can sell insurance policies. It's fundamentally in their interest to participate in the market where wildfire products are offered. What's more is they want to do a better job finding that risk and helping customers and different players manage that risk because it also helps their bottom line. If people are safer, they pay out fewer losses, right? So they actually don't want bad things to happen, right? And they want to stay in the market.
I agree with all of that. I also think of it like insurance is this connection for all of us between the now and the future. And the premiums that we have to pay now are our way of understanding how we're connected to the future on whatever it is, our bodies, our houses. And so if we don't really understand the future, we're in denial. Then the end of denial and a more clear-eyed connection between the now and the future ultimately, that makes a functioning society in a way that denial doesn't.
Yeah, so well said. I mean, look at your example. If you imagine like, oh, I really don't want to go get my blood work done because they might tell me that, my cholesterol's high. And what's amazing is we can actually help you with your cholesterol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so there's ways in which, in fact, more information about your blood pressure or your cholesterol and so forth, and actually gives you the information to be free from that worry and anxiety because now we have the data, we'll take steps and we'll act. That's the piece too, is it's a functioning society, but a functioning society that's empowered.
Let's switch at least for a few minutes to, because we've been talking about fire for a while now, and you mentioned floods and other things. But your ability to look at the natural world and help has played out in some other very different ways. So talk to us a little bit about when things go wrong, things get complicated. I know you have this big partnership now with the National Guard. How does that play out? How do you help them? Why do they care?
Right now, after natural disaster, the Civil Air Patrol, a branch of the Air Force, a bunch of civilians, get in planes and fly like a lawnmower over the natural disaster. A person hangs out of the plane with an SLR camera taking photos. They're looking at an angle down on the ground of a bridge that's been blown out, or snow that's covered an entire intersection, or floods that have like wiped out a farm. They take all those photos and then they land. Today, until our technology, the plan was to have human beings load up all those images and one at a time look at the image and find out what's in the image and determine if it's damaged or not.
But this must be tens of thousands of pictures.
Tens of thousands of pictures, each one taking about 3 minutes. So think about all those people on the ground. These are analysts, very talented people who are doing GeoGuessr.
And it sounds like it would take a week.
It takes hours. So their challenge was, is there a team out there, and they put this on the proposal, who can take in this image and use a machine to very quickly label these images? And the challenge is that if these images had perfect understanding of where they are on the planet, if we gave you a lat long of that object that it's looking at, this would not be a hard game for a machine learning sort of operation to win at. It's just straight classification. The challenge is we don't know where the thing is on the planet. So that was our insight.
You knew where the camera is on
Exactly.
the planet, at least approximately, but because you don't know exactly which way it's pointed or exactly how much it's tilted up or down, what it's looking at is kind of a mystery.
Exactly. And if you can imagine, sometimes there's a horizon in the picture. So you see the horizon, and a typical machine will actually get sort of confused by the horizon and just keep circling the globe looking for a fit, right? It's cool. But that's the exact challenge is, where is the camera pointing? What is it looking at? And by the way, the camera's moving too. It's like moving. So and all we know is the GPS of the camera. So off in the distance is a school. So is it the school that's to the northeast of the camera? Is it the school to the southeast of the camera? Which school is it? And then can you very quickly tell me which school it is? And is it damaged or not?
Just last year, Bellwether helped to process 70,000 images, assessing the damage from Hurricane Helene. 10 years from now, we hope that Bellwether will make working with all of those disparate pieces of data as easy as working with cells on a spreadsheet. But what for? What are the next dozen use cases out past fire and emergency response?
I think it's going to be a totally new category, like that we haven't quite imagined. It's been a category that people have tried to create, but the demand hasn't been there. But I think demand is changing because the world is changing, and because there's risks that we're no longer lumping in and calling risk. We're getting very specific about what we mean by risk. Is it cyber risk? Is it terrorism risk? Is it natural world risk? Is it severe weather?
And it's not just risk, right?
No, totally. Great point. I think biodiversity is going to be one of these things that's totally solved by this technology, because biodiversity is intensely local. I think with the emergence of this new technology, our understanding of biodiversity will be massively transformative to the communities that create biodiversity and maintain biodiversity, because they'll be more resilient. Cultivating biodiversity is a far more resilient way to create economic opportunity and keep communities healthy. So I think, in fact, biodiversity will get unlocked, which people talk about, but it's incredibly hard. And it's incredibly hard because of the data problem. I think in the future, these kinds of technologies are going to come together in a way, and it's going to be transformative.
I think Bellwether really does have the potential to transform how we understand so much of the processes on Earth that impact humanity. It's starting out now as a prediction engine for fire and in disaster recovery, but that is only the beginning. There's so much more Bellwether could do. Now, X is full of energetic doers like Sarah, who love to take on really big challenges. One of those doers is engineer and inventor Jacques Gagné. For 20 years, he ran Gecko Design Inc., a company known for doing the engineering necessary to take concept pieces and make them real, scalable, and profitable in manufacturing.
Our niche was actually working between the artist, here's the vision of what we would like to see, and the manufacturer, which would go, well, that's a lovely art piece, but we can't build that.
We'd been working with the Geckos for years, and in 2015, we acquired the team into X.
And eventually that turned into us managing most of the mechanical and electrical team for the support of all the moonshots here. So we had a blast. It's been 10 years.
Yeah, it's been a great 10 years. Thank you for that, by the way.
While he and his team were busy supporting many of the moonshots here at X, Jacques was also thinking about his own prospective moonshots. He believed there must be a way to turn useless byproducts like excess heat from industrial processes and data centers into something valuable, like, for instance, harnessing it to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Doing this could potentially make carbon capture a serious business proposition. There are various different methods of grabbing carbon dioxide back out of the world. Some of them aren't permanent, and others don't sound workable.
Okay, we can capture it from the stacks. We can clean some of the ocean. You can get it from air. That one stuck a little bit. What do you mean you can get it from air? It sounds ridiculous. It sounds impossible.
It sounds impossible because the Earth's atmosphere is around 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. That means all the other gases, including carbon dioxide, make up just 1% of the air. As of March 2025, the concentration of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere was about 430 parts per million. Now, that is nearly a third more CO2 than before the Industrial Revolution, but it's still a very small proportion of the overall molecules in the air.
It's the equivalent of having 4 blue balls in a bucket of 10,000 red balls. You got to go find and isolate those 4 balls. So you need some form of material that hunts for the blue balls and ignores the red balls.
Being able to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is already a really big idea. But doing it so cheaply that you could make money saving the world, that's the part that sounds really crazy.
Being a bunch of engineers and a bunch of system designers and a bunch of people who have done mass production in various ways, we know how things get cost cheaply.
Jacques was confident that along with the geckos, he could make this work as a business. Pulling carbon dioxide out of the air, direct air capture, or DAC for short, uses a sorbent. Think of it as a sponge to identify and pull molecules of CO2 out of the air. You then heat the sponge to get it to release the CO2, which is contained either for further use in food and industrial processes, for example, or to be sequestered, essentially buried underground. Credits for the sequestered carbon can then be sold into the carbon credit industry. So far, so good, right? But DAC has a design problem.
Think of it as you put something in a box, and then you run air on it, collect the CO2 onto it. Then you have to close the box and then heat up the box for the CO2 to come out. Then you are back to opening the box. So then you're losing all that heat. You have a machine that acts like a transformer in the movies. It has to turn from an adsorber to a desorber.
All this heating and cooling makes DAC really energy hungry and therefore really expensive. It was clear to Jacques that we needed to try a different way.
Henry Ford didn't move the factory around the car. He moved the car around the factory. So we decided immediately to start looking at the system like, what if this is like a production plant? And so then you're going through a specialized piece of equipment that its main job in the world is to allow air to go through it efficiently. Once that happens, that sponge keeps on its merry way through conveyors and then goes to a piece of equipment that is specialized into heating. It always stays hot. It's always under vacuum and you have a vapor lock. As far as I know, we're the only ones that are actually moving the sponge. Now, this is why X is a great place to be, because that is not the easy way to do it. That is a thinking out of the box way to do it.
So the geckos and others at X got to work on designing the machinery. But the other part of the puzzle was what to use as the sorbent. What could they use as their sponge to meet all the demanding requirements for the system they were imagining? For more than a year, they were trying to work on a sponge that used a very new technology that wasn't really ready for prime time yet.
That was a little, to say the least, and to be polite, more than a little frustrating. It would work really well, kind of like if you use a paper towel. After 5 times, the paper towel self-destructed.
So it wasn't a good sponge in that way.
It was horrifying. And so then even after, being told many times by the vendors, oh, yeah, no problem, it was more problem. And so then we developed our own sponge. We wanted to be the cheapest, mass production. So what is not unobtainium? What is there a lot of? What is a lot of sand? The technical term for a sand is silica. So ideally, having this silica, which is relatively cheap, with our sprinkled secret sauce on it, was actually a really good way of keeping our costs super low for the sponge.
Sand, or amorphous silica, on its own will obviously not absorb CO2. It needed, as Jacques said, a secret sauce, a coating that could both grab and release CO2 at the right moments.
You have our sand, then you have the first layer that's like a primer coat on a car. It's really sticky, it's hard to chip off. And then you put the fuzzy stuff on that coat.
And the fuzzy stuff? They were specially designed tiny molecular fingers that could grab the CO2, and then when heated up, the fingers relax and let go of it again.
That's not trivial.
He's right, it was not trivial. That special sauce was what took the most time, in fact, years of iterations to get right, because it had to work really, really well, be easy to apply, made of readily available materials, and not come off even after many months of heavy grinding use. And if this was to become a profitable business, it could not be complicated or expensive.
We did not want to do fancy stuff. We wanted to do stuff that we could do in mass production. But we had a lot of fun and a lot of really good and smart people and a lot of weekends and a lot of evenings mixing this stuff. And then when we got that chocolate cookie, we started getting it better. And now I think we have some very good cookies.
If you were to pour some into my hand, it would just look like white dust, right?
That is correct. It looks like white sand, like the same, in your vitamin bottles. There's this little packet and it's called silica gel. If you rip that open and pour it on a table, that's pretty much the base material.
What were you trying to design those molecules to be particularly good at doing? It wasn't just grabbing the carbon dioxide at any temperature.
It was to grab the carbon dioxide at super low temperature, because one of the things that we wanted to do from the get-go is, again, lowest energy, lowest cost. What costs you money is a high heat. Anything that you have to cook very hot, you need to use either a lot of electricity, natural gas, oil, or some method to heat. Our sorbent runs at a super low temperature. We can actually desorb as low as 70 degrees C, which is considered very low.
Jacques' special sauce also does something else that's really useful.
When you move large amounts of air through this material, 2 things happen. It likes water and it also likes CO2. So what happens is then for every ton of CO2 I also capture 2 tons of water, because it does a great job of absorbing water without becoming the world's largest kitty litter box. So it's natural for the material to capture some water, which is really nice, because that means we could be in the middle of the Sahara and it doesn't matter. The only place our equipment wouldn't work is Mars.
Assuming we're not in a zero humidity environment like Mars, this quirk of absorbing water means that this moonshot isn't just about the carbon credit market. There are places that both need lots of clean water and that generate lots of heat. In other words, places that could really use what Jacques and his team are offering. For example, data centers, huge warehouses filled with computers, all generating heat. Most centers manage the heat by putting it into water and sending that water off to cooling towers to evaporate away.
So in a place like right parked beside the Missouri River, that might not be an issue. But if you're in Arizona, if you're in California, if you're in many places on this planet, evaporating large amounts of water is an issue if the water is not available. So then we can offer to do that job that those evaporative coolers were doing, because I want that heat.
So if you're parked next to a data center, let's say, and they're giving you waste heat, one of the things that you can do is sell them clean water.
Correct. And also, it's really, really, as an example of the math, is per ton of CO2, I produce 2 tons of water, but I can save 10 tons of evaporation of water for a data center.
Because your process is removing a lot of the waste heat that they were sending you, which means they don't have to do something else with that heat.
Exactly. If they're evaporating billions of gallons of water, and I can turn that into 100 million gallons of water evaporate, or even 0, they get interested fast. In my opinion, looking at 3-4 years from now, I see new data centers actually popping up with no cooling towers, where they will actually be partnering with us to make direct air capture coolers. So we would become the cooling engine for the data centers.
Interestingly, this system can also be used as a kind of giant cooling system in an emergency. On the hottest days of the year, when the data centers have the hardest time staying cool enough to run efficiently. Jacques and his team have built something pretty extraordinary. This is technology that we think could scale up and be so useful. Taking the waste heat from industrial processes and putting it to work in beneficial new ways. This is where Helen Riley comes in.
I still remember one of my first experiences was of you on your rollerblades with your ponytail, cracking some joke. And I remember it being in equal parts, like kind of intimidating and overwhelming on the one hand, of like, am I even going to fit in this place? Because it is so weird.
Helen joined X from Google. She had been helping to guide the finance side of what we call bets, alphabet companies like Waymo and Wing that started at X. It was exciting and important work that prepared her to help turn our moonshot ideas into promising new businesses. One of these was the spin-out of Jacques' direct air capture project, now called 280 Earth.
We had some pretty hard conversations about what's the path forward for 280 Earth. Because on the one hand, under Jacques' leadership, it's an extraordinary team that have a amazing experience and have accomplished incredible things. They actually built out technology that worked. They managed to do what they said they were going to do. And they'd done it at a level of investment that we could all be proud of. And at the same time, to achieve that next sort of data point of learning and really proving it out was going to require a level of investment and capital that was this huge step change that is sort of outside the profile of what we would typically invest in. So that's not to say it wasn't possible, but that was going to be challenging. And Alphabet doesn't have the expertise to build a factory, and it really doesn't make sense for Alphabet to do so. So it was this tricky conundrum of, we've got a technology that we believe in, that works, that is great for the world, that is run by an extraordinary team, but it no longer made sense to, I think, either of us that Alphabet and X should still be the parties that are directly overseeing and funding it.
For 280 to be nimble enough, it needed to be able to buy land and partner swiftly, so we took the decision to not just spin 280 Earth out as a company under Alphabet's umbrella, but to spin it all the way out with Alphabet as a minority investor.
We had never done this before, spinning something out at this scale. And again, there were a lot of people said it wasn't going to work. Why would we do this? Why are we creating complexity? But actually, complexity isn't just bad for the sake, it's not like we should never do something. Yes, it's complicated, but that actually leads to a higher likelihood of success. And so that's what we did, even if it looked counterintuitive and weird and hard and through some eyes unnecessary, but that's actually what it took to help 280 be on the path to success that they are now.
As 280 Earth CEO, John Pimentel knows what he's doing. He's been developing energy projects and companies for 25 years, taking first-of-a-kind technologies through the process of broad market adoption, finding and securing funding, taking businesses like 280 Earth to the next level. He was a perfect fit.
We've built a team around commercializing the product. We've now built a full-scale commercial prototype that processes 500 tons per year of CO2, or captures a rate of 500 tons per year of CO2. And so the next step is to go to phase 2 of that project in the Dalles, Oregon, and build a 5,000 ton per year module. That module then can be replicated at scale up to projects as large as we want. We're targeting first 100,000 ton sized projects and then ultimately million ton sized projects using these modules.
If 280 Earth takes off in the way we hope it will, it could be an important partner for all energy-hungry industries to reduce their costs and turn excess heat into something valuable people can use. It's an important reminder that it's okay to be part of the solution. What both Bellwether and 280 Earth are doing is reacting to a need, helping to build a resilient, prosperous future. It's also a reminder that personal resilience is key if you want to make your own moonshot.
Don't be afraid. It is okay to go for a moonshot and, oh, this one did not work. You have to have that mindset. You actually want to go after the big goal. And you aren't always going to hit it, but you are going to hit it. And after being here 10 years, we have hit quite a few, which is actually the exciting part. It makes it hard, but it's part of the reason, bringing it back to the 280 and to direct air capture, is if we did not have that philosophy here at X, it would have been difficult to start with, let's move the sorbent around. Everyone thought we were nuts, by doing it that way. It's more expensive, it's harder, that can be really challenging, but it's a moonshot. It was thinking completely outside the box. You have to accept failure, but you also want to be motivated for the success. And if you're given the shot of doing that, you will actually hit that. And that's what the nice thing about a moonshot factory like X is that chasing that one is exciting.
You've been listening to the Moonshot Podcast, a Blanchard House production for X, the Moonshot Factory. I'm your host and captain of moonshots, Astro Teller. We really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. If you are, hit subscribe, leave us a review, and a rating wherever you listen. Next time, we're exploring one of the most pressing issues of our time, how to power the future.
Humanity has a growing appetite for energy. As time goes on, hopefully we can elevate everybody to a higher standard of living. To do that, we need a lot more energy.
The grid doesn't work today like the internet does. Power old systems like a 100-year-old grid. We're going to be able to plug in these newfangled things.
This is humankind's largest machine, the electric grid. So that to me, I was like, that is the moonshot. I could talk about, I hope this is a 6-hour podcast, is it?
It'll be more, actually.
Okay, good.